Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Green Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Mr. Michael Morris. Michael, how's it going?
Very well, thank you, Nick. Nice and sunny in Cape Town after a few days of rain. So, all very happy, thanks.
And of course, we're also joined today by Sara. Sara, how are you doing today?
Hi, well, Nick, nice and sunny after lots of sunny days with no rain.
Really? Okay.
Sorry, your mic has gone a little bit quieter for some reason. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway.
Okay.
No, there you go. Now it's fixed.
Oh, right. Okay. Good. Done.
No idea what happened. Anyway, right. Technical snafus aside, let us dig into the news. And this one is the kind of thing that makes me see red, or in this case, green, yellow, and gold. Green, yellow, and black, rather, which is that the ANC district municipality of, and I apologize for the pronunciation here, uMngeni, which is the district municipality that includes Howick, or the uMngeni municipality, which was won by the DA famously in the last local government elections, has voted to move forward with a plan to phase out the uMngeni municipality, which is around the town of Howick, in the process of trying to turn the district municipality into a metro. So, just a refresher for anyone who's a little bit confused about this, outside of the metro areas in South Africa. So the metros are like Cape Town, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, eThekwini, Durban. Every other municipality in the country that's not part of a metro belongs to what's called a district municipality, which is like a group of municipalities that are sort of grouped together and elect their own mayor and that kind of thing. So if you live in a rural South African area, you get 3 ballots in a local government election, not just 2 like you do in a metro. Anyway, I digress. The plan here is to incorporate the uMngeni, uMpendle, and uMpofana municipalities together to form one larger municipality, which would, in the words of the municipal manager, Ray Nkobo, be more financially viable and help to alleviate some of the financial concerns here. The municipal manager said, as things stand, uMpofana and uMpendle municipalities are not financially valuable, and the DA-run uMngeni municipality is also facing serious challenges in terms of financial viability. He also went on to say, look, studies show that little can be done to turn these municipalities around, and that's why we need to incorporate them together. This, of course, has elicited outrage from the DA, who says that this is complete rubbish, it's a waste of taxpayers' money, and quite simply, it will introduce an extra sort of 10,000 ANC votes into this now larger municipality, ensuring that the opposition will lose control of it after narrowly managing to win outright control of the uMngeni municipality after years of trying. So there was this vote in the district council, which said that they were going to move ahead with this plan and submit a proposal to the municipal demarcation board, who ultimately draw the lines of the municipalities to merge them together. They said this was not the first time that municipalities have been merged in KZN, and that is, of course, true. But I think in this case, it's pretty blatant what's going on. Furthermore, the district mayor of the municipality, I think, engaged in a little bit of race baiting here by saying these municipalities are a product of apartheid spatial planning where blacks were squeezed into barren land. As a municipality, we have to do something to address the injustices of the past. Well. Sara, let me start with you. Am I right to be so completely upset by this? This just seems like a blatant attempt to make sure the opposition cannot control a municipality.
Let's see. Let's put it this way. The injustices of the past, when that's invoked, you're dealing with scoundrels. Because these municipalities, I have no doubt, are in a bad financial state. The two they want to join up, because they have not been properly managed, or they've been, or there may have been corruption, or both. So it strikes me that all that's going to happen is, one of the things going to happen is if the two come in to join with uMngeni, is resources in the better, shall we say, municipalities are going to be spread more thinly. But really, it is what do they call it? The Americans got a word for it where they
Gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering. They remark the boundaries, and let me put it this way: I can't see any sort of half decent municipality wanting to bring in failed municipalities who are bankrupt. So to bring in failed municipalities who are bankrupt, I don't think that's I don't think that's the first choice. I think it's upping the number of ANC voters, and thereby obviously changing the dynamic completely. And the DA, I assume, would without doubt be out of power, which of course must be something that the ANC really, really wants. But as I say, as soon as you go back to the sort of apartheid era at this point in time, to justify, although I don't see, even if you could, I can't see the link. You can probably pretty much assume that it's being done for nefarious, self-serving means.
So, Michael, there's just so much to kind of mine out of this one. I mean, this little comment here about how studies have shown that very little can be done to turn these municipalities around just seems like a completely outrageous claim for a municipal manager to make about the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And one needs only to consult the Auditor General's reports over perhaps as long as the ANC has been in power, just about. I would have thought. To see, the gathering crisis in local government, and if there's one thing that's not going to make a jot of difference to that, it's surely fiddling around with the boundaries of municipalities. They're quite straightforward procedures which can be taken. You appoint the right people, you may hold them accountable, you make sure the books are done. This is not rocket science. This is how you fix municipalities, and it has to be said the DA has shown how to do that. The DA's record is pretty good. I think there's some ANC councils that have also had quite a good run, but yeah, clearly,
right. They do not include the Impendle and Mpofana municipalities.
Indeed. And it strikes one that that little phrase "injustices of the past," people tend to overlook this, but it now, in fact, incorporates about a quarter of a century, but more than a quarter of a century of ANC rule. So it's not automatically pre-1994. It's whatever has happened before today, and we have a pretty good chronicle of what has happened since 1994 to demonstrate where things go wrong, how badly they go wrong.
And this is not the first time that the ANC is really engaged in what I would call gerrymandering. I remember, I think there was an attempt to sort of do something like this with the Cape Town municipality back when the DA first took it over in around 2006. I think there may have been an aborted attempt. I think it was stopped in court and abandoned. And then, of course, there are these plans to merge the Eastern Cape, a bedrock of ANC support, with the Western Cape, or to do away with provinces entirely. So it seems here like there's a nice sort of meetup between the ANC's desire to centralize absolutely everything and, a very convenient political decision because, gerrymandering is not new in South Africa. Go and look at a map of the Johannesburg Metro, and you will notice that it has a massive sort of chunk that just goes south and incorporates Orange Farm. And I'm not quite sure why Orange Farm it more belongs to Johannesburg than I think it's the Mfuleni municipality or those other ones around there. To me, it seems very blatant that this is an attempt to make sure there are more ANC voters in Johannesburg. And you can look all over the country, you see things like this. Sara, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, it strikes one that one of the things we're looking at here is the DA's advance in uMngeni is precisely the result of the popular rejection of the failed option, and they've now made a different choice. And how ironic that this is the very point at which the ANC girds itself to act, instead of acting to actually retain its credibility and clean governance and so on at local government. Anyway, that's an aside almost, but how ironic.
So look, this thing is still quite early in the process. Even if the district municipality has now decided to make the application, they still have to make the application, which, knowing the speed of government, will take a very long time, as all things in government do. And then it'll have to be submitted to the Municipal Demarcation Board, and then presumably the Municipal Demarcation Board has to make a decision. And if that decides to incorporate them, then I'm sure the DA will challenge it in court. But Sara, I'm very concerned about gerrymandering. Do you think we're going to see more of it as we get closer to 2024?
Well, I think by the sort of the examples you've given are such a sort of clear sign. It's not a moral thing. It's not it's not even politically crafty. It's just either opportunity to expand power, or the opportunity to get another party out of power. It's that simple. I mean, if you look at KZN, uMngeni was a real breakthrough for the DA, but it's not as if there aren't 100 other municipalities or districts that have municipalities in them. I keep forgetting which is in the right order. It's not as if the DA is an enormous threat all over KZN. I mean, it's one municipality. It's an extraordinary and unusual event, and yet
the only other municipalities they have a chance in, I think, are like Durban, and that's about it.
It seems one can't help coming away with the impression that it's a venal political reason for doing so, but it's not really worth very much overall. I mean, it doesn't make a grand difference, but it's certainly it's snide. It's a little bit I don't know what it is. It's sort of, there's something just a little bit petty about it almost.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly the right word, I think, for it. And it's the kind of thing that the ANC really needs to knock off, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of drama if they lose in 2024, if these sort of sentiments win out within the ruling party. One last thing here, it's just worth talking about two opposition parties. The IFP, I think they said they were opposed to this merger, but they were a little bit sort of cautious about it. They said, oh, well, maybe we want to merge this stuff all together, but we're just not so happy with the current approach of the district. So they were sort of being on the fence there, which to me seems like a big tactical error, because if this can be done to the DA in southern KZN, I'm sure it can be done to the IFP in northern KZN.
Absolutely. And if I remember, Nick, the IFP sort of expressed some support for the idea of creating a metro.
Yes.
I mean, good grief. Really.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that Howick and surrounding areas are what comes to mind when I think of metro. Anyway, and of course the EFF tactically didn't vote with the ANC here, but of course didn't vote with the DA either. They just sat silently abstaining, which I think shows that they're still hedging their bets as to what to do in this circumstance. Up to no good, no doubt. Anyway, let us move on to our next topic. Unless you have a final thought, Michael.
No. I mean, just to return to your very first point, I think, which, this is taxpayers' money again being spent on something which we really absolutely don't need. And how bizarre is that?
Right. So let's move on to our next topic for today. We talked a little bit on the show, and of course, many people around the country are very concerned about this. The massive spike in the petrol price, which is being driven by all sorts of stuff, not least, of course, the conflict in Ukraine, the Russian invasion there. And we are now looking at something close to a R2 hike to the petrol price. It looks like 93 octane is expected to climb by R1.76 in the coming days, which is quite hectic. And we've seen, at least with 95 octane petrol, an increase of about 35% to the price in a year, jumping from 17.32 Rand to 23.44 Rand. So, I mean, that's 35% less. 35% more money spent on petrol by people every time they fill up. That's pretty hectic stuff. That's real inflation. As part of measures to combat this, we're hearing today, it's being reported on Financial 24, that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is going to announce some emergency fuel price interventions. Now, a lot of people watching this video may know specifically what those are because he would have announced them. But for us who do not have the benefit of of knowing the future, there has been some speculation that this is indeed going to be something like a temporary holiday from the fuel levy. So that would basically cut the fuel price down by about R4 per litre, which is quite a hectic amount. Michael, what do you make of this? Good idea? Bad idea?
Well, it's always welcome news when there is some sign of relief from the pressures that only seem to be mounting on South African consumers, and we know that whenever there's a pressure on the fuel price, it gets passed on to everything else. Food goes up, and consumer goods and so on. So it is always a harbinger of bad news for the poor, long-suffering consumer. So good news in that sense. And, I don't really know enough about either Godongwana himself or about the economy, but one does have a sense that Godongwana is kind of figure who's been quite responsive to the economy, quite responsive to problems, with his decision on Transnet and Eskom relieving them of having to abide by some of the racial edicts concerning tenders and so on is an indication of this too. It might not be wholly true. So there's kind of sense of perhaps some good news there, but on the other hand, we do have the sense we could spare ourselves a great deal of the trauma of crisis management and dealing with everything because we allow it to become a crisis by not allowing things to become a crisis in the first place. And that would be to apply tried and tested approaches to labor, to property, to imports, to manufacturing, to just and freeing up the private sector to be as dynamic as we know it is capable of being, and that really, I think, in the taking a step back perhaps from all the immediate factors that are coming to play in the fuel price, that really is what we ought to be looking at. Is how do we enable this very effective economy, when it's allowed to be effective, to be dynamic and to generate solutions, which would include cushioning the blows of international events and oil price and so on.
I think that's a really good point about avoiding the crisis in the first place, because if indeed the minister does sort of suspend the fuel levy for at least a time, I'm pretty okay with that, I must say. It sounds like a good idea to me. We are already very overtaxed. It'd be nice to have a bit of relief in that sector. But of course, what's the problem with that? It means that there's going to be this huge hole in the fiscus, which is already extremely so shaky. And so we really now are in a position where government actually has no good options. It doesn't matter what choice it takes. It's going to probably end up hurting quite a lot of people. Sara, your thoughts on this?
No, Nick, I absolutely agree with that, because one wonders. I was exactly going to say, how long can the government afford to do this? I mean, if we'd been a really successful economy and we were doing all the right things, lowering inflation, lowering unemployment, etc., then you would assume it's being done because it can be done and can be afford to be done. But one can't help feel that it's being done to give relief. There is an understanding that we do need the relief, but it can't be sustained, probably even beyond the month of April. I don't know if it's any. I mean, look, everyone's experiencing a surge in prices as a result of the war in Ukraine. My kids have got a friend who lives in Gibraltar, and he said it costs now about the equivalent of 30 Rand to get a litre of petrol there. So it is. We're not alone, but we don't have the capacity to absorb it that the European countries or America can do, and they're going to complain bitterly. And I think that's the problem is, you don't pay you have the tax relief on the fuel levy, and then how does the government deal with a hole in the fiscus, which it's got to have. sorry, just go back to the previous subject. I see one of our audience members, Patricia, says, we are definitely not a metro, but we are wealthy. Well, question asked and answered.
Yes. I feel like there will be quite a lot of wealth transfers from one municipality to another if they are
So
among
now we know. But I'm just I'm not looking at it skeptically too much, other than, it's a good political thing to do. Maybe what it is, but I am concerned that it's going to be a short, as a panacea, it's going to be very short term.
So I see someone in the audience is pointing out here that saying that it's not just the war that caused the inflation, and I think that's worth mentioning. It's definitely contributing to it, particularly the oil stuff, right? Because Russia is a major oil producer, and now the sanctions on it have made it difficult for it to export some of its oil, because of being they often rely on a lot of Western countries to provide the logistics to get the oil out. But I think that is a point worth making, that while this stuff is global, a lot of it does have its roots not just in conflict or accident, but in bad policy. And unfortunately, it's not just South African bad policy, but and this is, I think, perhaps because none of us are really sort of economics people, this is perhaps a bit beyond our remit, but with bad policy in the US, there's been a lot of warnings that the big, I think, what's his name, Larry Summers, who's a sort of center-left American economist, warned that putting the huge amounts of money into the American economy that some of the COVID stimulus was planning to do was probably going to cause inflation. And here we sit.
And lo and behold,
a lot of inflation. Yeah. And of course, when Americans' economy, something happens to it, almost everyone else in the world, except North Korea, feels it. Michael, anything to add on this point before we close off?
I think, to combine all the various points that have been made, one has the sense that one's shifting an element or a degree of vulnerability around. You're kind of taking it out of this box and putting it in the next box. You keep it there for a little bit, and then you've got to move it somewhere else. But throughout, that vulnerability, in fact, is sustained. Nothing is being done to address that fundamental problem, and to tap into what we know to be elements of resilience in this society. I mean, we are an astonishing society. We don't give up easily. We don't collapse easily. We're used to being in a kind of crisis mode, and that have been on and off for a couple of 100 years. It's the scope is there to do things differently. We just have to decide to approach it in that way.
Exactly. I like that idea that South Africa's been in a crisis for 100 years. And if you think that's a silly thing to say, there's a country that's even better at that, which is Argentina. They have been in a crisis for 100 years. And you can go and look at it. They're still one of the wealthiest countries actually in South America somehow. And yet they are also a complete shambles. And it's surprising that they've lasted so long. So the Argentinian model. Yeah, exactly. The Argentinian model is one that you really don't want to follow, because what it's done is it makes crisis sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So let's go now to our last topic for today, and that is our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to be appearing before the South African Human Rights Commission's hearing into the July unrest. So, I mean, the July unrest was a pretty big deal, particularly for those in KZN. And President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to be testifying before it tomorrow, I believe, where he's going to be talking about, according to the story here, quote, his responsibility as the head of state. So the SAHRC launched the hearing to uncover the causes of the unrest as well as the impact on human rights. I'm not sure if you really need a committee for the second part of that, but anyway. So we don't know exactly what the president is going to say, of course, but that's never stopped us from speculating before. So, Sara, let's start with you. What do you think he will say, and what can he say? What's
Well, you see, the problem was that his and the government's response in regard to the riots was so dire that theoretically he should say, it is my responsibility to serve and protect the people of South Africa, and I failed dismally. They didn't have intel. Where they had intel, there were infighting between one ministry and the other ministry as to whose intel was the right intel, and then, of course, I mean, that was the one disaster. My impression from everything I've read about that, the processes that followed, was that in his very inimical style, he acted not fast enough. Let's put it that way. I don't say acted slowly. I just say that he acted without the sense of critical urgency that was needed. I don't know how he dealt with his ministers who were responsible, but the ministry that came out really badly was police. And it came out badly because not only did they either ignore, not know, or knew, but ignored whatever intel they had, but they just really came up from behind in terms of protecting communities, or be aiming to, get involved in violence, sort of part the sides in the violence. They were late to the party. They were often completely undermanned. So you'd literally have, for the number of police you had, they couldn't take the risk going in, because all that would happen is they'd probably just get killed. And they often teamed up with civil society groups that already had to take the initiative to protect the areas they were in. So it was an embarrassment on a huge, huge level. And we now see that the police commissioner is going. He's been persuaded to fall on his sword, or whatever the process was. But the police minister is still in place. And that actually speaks volumes about what happened in July, in that, the police minister didn't do the job. His people didn't do the job. There seemed to be infighting left, right, and centre between commissioners, and then between the Defence Force, and then between the security agencies. And so it literally became an embarrassing sort of tangle of not getting anything done while things were burning and people were being killed. And I'm not sure that there is anything that Cyril Ramaphosa can say that excuses him or explains or justifies his performance as the head of state. I think if he's going to tell the truth, he has to say he took his eye off the ball completely and let us all down.
Very well said. As David points out in the comments, and I remember the DM making a big point of this at the time, John Steenhuisen went to visit places where the riots had happened before Ramaphosa did. Ramaphosa took quite a while. He waited for things to calm down a bit before he showed up. Anything to add, Michael, before we close today?
Just a few things. I mean, one thing that I wonder whether any attention is going to be given to is the interesting moment where Ramaphosa did go to KwaZulu-Natal and was speaking to camera and actually spoke highly of citizens stepping up and playing a role. And he made the point they're not only defending their property and their lives, but they're defending democracy, which is quite an interesting thing.
Which was exactly the right thing to say in that moment.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see whether there'll be any recollection of that. I
strongly suspect he'll walk that back. Yeah.
I mean, just two things. Regrettably, these sorts of talk shops seldom yield much of value, and we have to ask: do we really need any more scrutiny to be brought to bear on something that we all had a pretty good understanding of? The issue is really, what is being done, what has been done since then, to fix things. And one of the worrying things that I'm looking at, just two things here very briefly, Nick. One is a business live story of yesterday, or might even have been today. The headline says it all: dirty cops. 73% of South Africa distrusts the police. That's that gives you an idea of where the problem lies. And then a letter that our boss John Andrews wrote earlier this week, published earlier this week, talking about this thing that we've referred to earlier in the show, the huge debt servicing problem, and the waste of taxpayers' money on things, and how are we running out of money. John points out that by 2024-25, the government will spend R1 billion per day servicing its debts. This is according to Treasury projections. And that today it is already spending more on servicing its debt than on the army, police, courts, and home affairs combined. So I think that gives you a very clear picture of where there might be a problem.
So let's end with a little bit of good news. We didn't have time to include this in the show, but a former Eskom financial controller who faked invoices of 35 million rands has gotten a 20-year prison term. So someone is indeed going to jail for corruption. Anyway, we hope you all have a wonderful and excellent weekend, and we will see you next week on the Daily Friends Show. Cheers, everyone.